Never get sick of the song.
It's good. It's a good song.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myron, and this is the Underground QA podcast. I am hosting the host today for the first time, and so I'm already failing faster. Have you seen the shirt?
Byron, did you forget to turn the music off?
Yeah, I know. I forgot to turn the music off, so I'm turning the music off.
That's cool.
Now.
It's a jam.
Hopefully,
it's jam.
All right, let me kill the music.
No.
Okay, all right, the music is officially dead. I did that manually. So welcome to the Underground QA podcast, everyone. The podcast about quality assurance in the video game industry. My name's Myron. My pronouns are he, him. We have two fellow professionals joining us today, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi there, I'm Ariel Smith. I am a senior test lead at Bungie, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, I'm Joe Leiter. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a senior tester at Bethesda Softworks. That's it.
Thanks for introducing yourselves. And so it's really important to note that all individuals on the podcast are not doing so as official representatives of their respective companies, and the opinions expressed here are their own, or our own. We're people too, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, yeah.
If organizations can be people, we can be people.
Yeah, if organizations can be people, people can be people.
Yes,
I think that's
people
fair.
Can be people, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to start off today with a lightning round. You've seen it before, but the lightning round is going to be responding to this question. What is a game you enjoy watching speedruns of?
Ariel?
I'll go first.
Would you like to? Yeah.
So I really like watching speedruns of games that I am going back to that I have played before. So because whenever I watch a speedrun, I learn something interesting about the game that I didn't know if I've never seen a speedrun of it before, because there's all these kinds of tricks and interesting ways that speedrunners play the game that you might not play if you're just kind of casually playing through. And some of those things can be really fun and useful to learn if you are going back and playing for fun. So one of the things that I watched this week is I watched some speedruns of Grim Dawn, and I realized that you can go into an alternate game mode and get a couple of fast level ups and gear and stuff like that to get your main campaign run kind of started. So a lot of speedrunners would do that, and they would go level up in this other game mode really quick, so that when they shifted back over to the main campaign, they could just blitz right through the first 2 hours or so, or hour or so of it, because they didn't have to worry about leveling up gear or putting a bunch of points in their skill points every 5 minutes or so. They would just do it in a big chunk, get it out of the way. So I like doing that because you learn all these interesting things about how you can play the game better just casually.
Right. I really enjoy watching, there's two kinds, I guess. I really like the classics, the ones that people have just done to death and found all these crazy ways to exploit frames and save states and things like that. So, your Majora's Mask, your Ocarina of Time, Mario 64, all these crazy, older ones that have so much tech that you can apply to it. I also really like watching speedruns of games that I have played before and have found super difficult or very long experiences, and see on a Games Done Quick or something like that, I see it up on the roster as this game takes an hour, and it's that game took me 30 hours to beat. How do they that's always appealing. So I really enjoy watching Dark Souls speedruns, stuff like that, because I'm just it's crazy because those games are quite difficult, especially for me, and it's really fun to watch them get beat up real quick.
I wish I could have seen some Dark Souls speedruns before I was testing Dark Souls, because it would have made it a lot easier.
The crazy thing about Dark Souls is in a way, if you played that game, so after hour 200, you essentially start like the strategies for negotiating the game were not straightforward. That was one of the key things. That game for me introduced a lot of complexity, because when you go into a game like that, you think that you're just going to just like, there's stairs there, so I'm going to walk up the stairs and I'm going to beat the dragon. Not really. There's a lot of, so that's really interesting, that game. I could go on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. The level design is world class. It's great.
It very intentionally tries to like trick you and trap you in the obvious routes. So
right.
Like you really have to be like, the game seems to want me to go up those stairs, but I don't want to go up those stairs because the game wants me to go up those stairs. It's a trick. It's a trick. Yeah. I know it is.
Yeah, it's like if I fall off the precipice, right? What's down there? Is it death, or souls? You know what I'm saying? So I'll just jump in with a game that I like to watch speed runs of. Factorio. Like I never really watched speed runs until I saw Factorio speed runs, and they're amazing. I think, yeah. Go on.
I had never heard of Factorio. I'm looking at it, and it was like it's like an RTS, or it looks like an RTS kind of.
So it's like an RTS for sure, but it's like, or it's real time, but it's like a base building survival game. Like it's more like, it's like a mashup of like city building and like world building. It's definitely a sim, but slash an RTS, because there are like enemies on the stage, and you have there's some tower defense in there. It's just a really cool, and you can get a server and all this other stuff. But like,
that sounds like a god game.
Yeah, it's I love watching that. And so before I answer this question for myself, I'm gonna sneak in a second lightning round question. What is the game that you've watched the most of from a time perspective of speed runs
of? Probably one of the Final Fantasy games, because a lot of those speedruns are just long, and so it takes a while to get through them all. But yeah, I want to say Final Fantasy VI, because that one is like you can beat it in a decent clip, but it does take a while to get all the way through. And I really enjoy that game, so it's a lot of
fun. Mine's probably Deathloop. Out of utility and just by default, but if not that, I don't know, probably the Pokemon games, because I like seeing those, like, or because they're also very long, like relatively long for a speed run. They're always fun to watch at like GDQ or places like that.
So just for context, that's the game that you work on, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah, the game that I like, so that was kind of a trick question, because mine is the same. I kind of spoiled it. I was like, yeah, so like I've only watched, that was the first one I watched speedruns of, and I watched speedruns of it, and that's pretty much still the only one I watched speedruns of. So it's Factorio for me, and I see Chelsea in the audience, Currency, Metroid. Those, see, but like I used to watch my older brothers do just runs of Metroid. Like, yo, have you ever seen the Metroid? A friend comes over, no, and then we just like sit and watch them play through the first and the second and the new suit and all the other cool stuff. Thank y'all so much for that lightning round. That's really enlightening, and so we see where people are coming from. And so speedrunning is the key theme of what we're doing today. And I wanted to start with just a definition. Joe, can you give us a TLDR of what speedrunning is?
Sure. Speedrunning is the art of playing a game in a way that will get you through it as quickly as possible. And people will usually time that and post into leaderboards, and you can do all different kinds of categories. Something key to note is the term any percent will usually refer to beating the game by any means necessary, including things that developers don't really intend on having. So you'll, usually break something in game to get to the end faster, and that means like any method to finish the game is any percent, and then there's all kinds of different categories, and some of them get quite interesting. There's glitchless categories, which is just playing the game as fast as you can. There's competitions where multiple runners will play the same game to see who can do it the fastest. But at its very base, it just means playing a game really fast and trying to get through it as quickly as possible.
When you said by any means necessary, I immediately had this image of someone driving to a developer's house and being like, now put this bug in the game.
Hey. Yeah. Yes.
Any means necessary short of, threatening violence against
in
death.
game.
Yes.
In game.
Yes. IRL. It's some IRL,
any exploits you find
illegal
are
stuff.
legal to use. Yes.
Yeah.
In-game
Yes.
stuff.
It's actually interesting because in glitchless games, sometimes they have specific definitions for what glitchless means in a given
That's correct.
game. Because sometimes, like when is an exploit and when is it not? Because sometimes, if a game is broken, for example, you might not be able to do certain things in it that you need to complete a category because of a glitch, and or because there's a bug or something like that. So the only way to do it is to cheat essentially.
Right. I think that gets defined by the communities themselves. They'll usually come to consensus on which bugs are considered legal in glitchless runs and which are not. There's so many different little pockets of speedrun communities that they all just have their own rules for stuff, and
Yeah, it feels like each game has its own speedrunning community, really, and
for the
maybe
most part, there's
some
crossover
overlap,
for
but-
sure.
yeah.
But there's usually core communities for any game that you're looking at specifically, and sometimes that extends to series, and there's overlaps, and someone that likes speedrunning Castlevania probably likes speedrunning Metroid, things that make sense.
So
There's also. Go ahead.
So they get good at certain mechanics. So for example, if you went to the Olympics and there's someone that always jumped hurdles their entire life, they may be able to do one of the longer races for speed, but the sprinter is really good in speed. So you can generalize some of those skills, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
In some cases, because a lot of times in speedruns, it doesn't necessarily come down to the mechanics of the game. It comes down to very specific frame timing and certain things like that. So that can translate. There's a lot of times where you can glance from common issues that happen in certain engines. So certain engines will usually yield some issues with that can be exploited across the board, regardless of the game or even the type of game, if you can manipulate it that way. So,
Chelsea just linked in chat a link to the Games Done Quick website. Games Done Quick is it's a charity speed run that does a lot of different speed runs where they'll bring people on and kind of watch them do a speed run live, and people can donate while they're doing it. But they have a bunch of a list of all of the different games that people have submitted on there too. One of the interesting things I think about speedruns is that you can speedrun any game, and many games have never done never had a record recorded before, because they're really obscure games or not very popular or whatever. So if you want to be a world record holding speedrunner, you just need to find an obscure enough game, and you can be.
Yeah.
And maybe someone will come along and beat it at some point, but it's a very accessible way to get into it. Is to you can either try and do the speedruns that everyone else has done and see how fast you can get, or you can just be like, I'm going to speedrun a game that nobody has done before and just get a record.
Yeah, and so thanks for that, Ariel. One of the things that we wanted to ask or talk about next was sort of why people speedrun, but I don't know. Is there anything else to add to that? Like there's a huge community. It can be very technical. What are some other reasons that people
I honestly think it's just human nature to want to like take something like an experience you enjoy and kind of like mold it to the way that you want to enjoy it. And you can really do that through speedrunning and trying to find. It's also just like it's like transformative art, in my opinion, in some ways too. Like watch some of these things. It's insane to watch like how strangely they move through that. So I really think it's just it'll happen with anything interactive like that. People will want to understand it further and break it. It's how we think.
Well, Joe, it's amazing that you mentioned art. You know, in you may not know this, but in previous episodes, I tend to put on the hat of the quality artist, where everything is based on skill and love versus other things.
Absolutely.
Right? But like, so like, do development teams use speed running because of the transformative art and the joy of it, or is there another reason that teams are using this as a serious tool?
Yeah, absolutely. Speedrunning as a utility is super important to a lot of QA testing, like testing cycles and aspects of testing. It can really be used. It is definitely within development, I would say, looked at as more of a tool and a utility than as an art, just because that's, you know, we're at work.
Right.
But, you know, I think that, you know, it can kind of transcend that internally. It just depends on the people that you have and how they feel about it and how they do it. Because, you know, some people wouldn't look at it as like an art thing, and it is just a utility thing, and as long as it's sustainable, that's, you know, that's fine for them. But that's the way I see it. I look at it as an art, like everything else in games. But yeah.
Cool. So should we get into like what are some of the ways you can use it in QA?
Sure.
Since that's what we're here to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally cool with that. Yeah, if you just want to throw me questions or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, why don't we just kind of start by, like, I found it really interesting when we were talking the other day to just have you tell your story about like what you've been doing and how you've been using it.
Sure.
So yeah, wherever you want to start, really.
So pretty much any project that I've worked on or that I've been a part of or been adjacent to, anything like that, there have been mentions of using speedrunning for certain things, but it usually wasn't even really referred to as speedrunning. There would be using tools for like collecting save banks for accessibility for like testers to get into certain parts of games faster if we don't necessarily have the tools for that. It would be, you know, an extension of smokes, sometimes like smoke testing. Sometimes it would be, you know, golden path testing, making sure that, you know, there are things that are upheld to like certain milestones of development, and having and ultimately just having a good overhead view of the content of your game at certain milestones. But it really wasn't as like formalized. And when I started to do work like on Deathloop specifically, I wanted to do like more of that. I wanted to kind of extend that, and I saw that games like as a really good tool to kind of build up a group of people that could do this, and especially in conjunction with just how interesting that game worked and how interesting progression in that title is. You know, I won't get super far into the weeds on that, but we started using it for a couple more reasons. You know, we would do save banks, we would run smokes, and you know, we'd have a smoke test done, and then, you know, a while later the everyone would know, like, you can get through the entire game. Like, it's just good to have that kind of overhead view of it. And as we progressed further, Myron,
Yeah, like
to,
I was gonna ask. Thanks for catching that, Joe. I was gonna ask, like, how do you, like, where did the idea come from? So like just paint the scene for us. One day you go into work, you're like, hey everyone, we're gonna, like, I know we're like on a super critical project,
right?
You know, but like, I got an idea. Let's use capacity to like speed test. Now hear me out.
Well,
what happens? Like, what's the rest
interesting
of that
is
story?
that didn't really happen at all. It just kind of comes together organically because there's a divvying of responsibilities on any team, and something that came to me was progression, golden path, and I had done like smoke testing, like coordination and basically like workflow management a lot in some previous projects that I've been on. So I was excited to kind of like get into progression. So my my responsibility of owning progression, golden path, just kind of like led to me, going through at earlier iterations and certain milestones and writing guides, game guides, like speedrun guides and things like from some other documentation and things like that, and working my way through it myself. It just started out as just me during a work from home phase, and I just spent tons of time just really understanding the title that I'm working on, and writing documentation kind of based around, I kind of wrote it like you would write something after a game releases,
Right.
to just, to do that. So then when the team grew a little bit, I had some more people join me, and it was pretty easy for me to get them up to speed because of some of the documentation and stuff that I wrote. Shocker how that works, right?
Right. Well, like, I'm sorry, Joe.
No, you're fine.
But like, so like, you noted there's a bunch of like tools, like there's a bunch of things you can use speedrunning for. So like, you mentioned Golden Pass, you mentioned training, you mentioned a few other things. But like, what are some things that, like, if someone's came to this episode today being like, speedrunning question mark, like, how can I convince my team to let me try it? What are some things they can be used for?
Well, on a less utility, and we can go into more of a speedrunning as an art kind of thing. What is really important is to have, if you're not working directly with a developer, if you're not an embedded test team or you're not a development test team, in my situation, we're a publishing test team, is trying to keep open dialogue with developers, especially if this is what you're doing, and if you're the kind of tester that can glean good information from speedrunning, so you can help inform design through different milestones and help to craft a better speedrunning experience for the game once it comes out. Because in a lot of cases, speedrunning is the best, most organic way to extend the longevity of your title and to extend sales of your title, if that's what's important to you post-release. Wow. Beyond that, it gives you a better experience on the game as a whole, I think, because games that are made with these outlying players in mind just tend to do better and to be perceived as better experiences.
Right.
And beyond all of that, and I need to just shout out to Arcane Leon for always being open to the things that we say and to the suggestions that we had made throughout and the dialogues that we've had. It's amazing, and every developer should treat external QA with the same respect that they have. So I just want to say that for them. If we get into something a little less of what my path, because that what I just explained to you is like the ethos of like what I like to do and what I want to do in QA is to inform development and how to craft better experiences. And I think that just comes down to quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like coming down to quality, absolutely. And I was going to actually say, it sounds like it can be a tool, like if you're more interested, because who you are matters,
Right.
but like in your career, right? But like it sounds like if you are really fascinated with the aspect of validation, are we doing the right thing? Are we building
Correct.
the right experience? Does this work, like from a qualitative perspective?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, we really, dug into it and had good back and forth, and the game that we did it for got really good reviews. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it kind of speaks for itself. Obviously that again, everyone involved is just an amazing experience all around. But if we move from this into a little, very important, but in my opinion, a little more boring territory, more utilitarian territory with speedrunning. There's always the ability to collect footage for ratings boards. There's the ability to run through content in ways to help with accessibility and like photosensitivity testing, things like that. There's all kinds of utility purposes that like, if you have people on your team that can experience the wide breadth of your content of your title in an hour and a half in 90 minutes, like there's a lot, like you can just apply that to so many different things. And that's kind of how it happened. My team of like, I think at our peak, there were 4 of us. We had a ton of this stuff just fall into our lap because it was, who else would you ask? And that's because there's people doing their thing and they're doing their part, and they know more about like weapons systems, or they know more about in-game economy, things like that, level art and stuff. But we were the people that, if you needed something found quickly and you needed content checked quickly, who else would you ask? There would be a complete bottleneck of work to be done if you have a tester that would take a day to complete the game, where we could complete the game. If all 4 of us were doing it, we could complete the game like 20 times in a day if we really had to. Like it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we've kind of dancing around one of the most obvious benefits of speedrunning, which is you can test faster, right? Like
Yes.
you can just do the things you're already doing faster.
And usually like flexing that muscle that helps you speedrun, that helps you understand how to get through the game, kind of complements other aspects. And you're obviously you probably are decent at the mechanics of the game in other ways, like you have good aim, how the AI works, you step here, don't step here, tons of stuff. It informs so many aspects of testing that like it was completely invaluable when we were going through like every milestone.
Yeah, one of the things that I have done in the past is I'll periodically do audits of some of my tests that we run regularly, like the smoke test, for example, just to make sure that the order in which the test cases are listed in that test is the fastest order you can complete them in, because I want that test to be able to be run as quickly as possible without compromising the quality of it, right? Like I don't want people to rush it. I just want them to be doing it in an order that makes sense so that it is naturally faster than they would be if they were doing it in some other way. So I'll periodically go back and look at tests and just to see if can we alter the order of these test cases in order to speed this test up without compromising it.
Does it serve your development cycle? And that's it's really important.
Sarah, Lady Odd Duck from the crowd or the chat says, and the final weird exploits the team may or may not want in the game. So it's like if you're trying to do these other things, you can find exploits as well.
Something else I should probably explain about the speedrunning community too is if you release a version of your game that has exploits to give a faster speedrun, and then you patch them, people will still just go back and use the one that has exploits. It is a constant, and that is part of being in a speedrun community. So it almost makes it it's funny because it almost makes it like null and void if you've just released something that has these exploits in it. People are going to find a way to play it. People are going to find a way to do that because it's what gets them through the fastest, and that's That's what they want to do.
God, I wish I could go back and
Versions
play.
too.
I wish I could go back and play older versions of MMOs.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Like, wow, let me go back and play it when it's good. Come on.
That's one of the reasons that they version speedruns as well. Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
there's still speedruns for version 1 point whatever 1.6 on Factorio, and there's a thriving community around that because that's like a state. The rules were at a particular point. They don't change the rules for track and field every time there's an Olympics. They keep the same
Right.
rules, and it's about the same.
I also think that in a way those are kind of like those are pretty big barriers to entry for a lot of people that would get interested in speedruns, because I know I've looked into some communities and it's like follow this 5-page guide on how to like get back to a different I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna do something else.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, if developers seek to craft these more holistic speedrunning experiences, that would there's less barrier to entry. There's more people doing it, and your game's talked about for 5 years instead of 5 months.
Yeah, I would imagine that because the nature of speedruns can change so much from update to update that it must be hard to get back into speedrunning a game that you used to speedrun and has since gotten a bunch of updates.
Yeah.
Just because like the game will have kind of changed and you won't really be up to date with the latest meta of the speedrunning community for that game,
Yeah. Yeah, there's tons of barriers to entry with speedrunning. Obviously, it's something that is by definition more difficult than just enjoying a game that you want to play. So I think the less barrier to entry there is on certain titles, the better.
Right. Now talking about, so we just talked a little about the utility of it and talk about the the community around speedrunning, but like on the development team side, we talked about this aspect of sometimes losing track of the fact that you are building an experience, you're building a game, and how this is one of the ways that like boosts the morale of the team and helps people to continue seeing it as a full game, or like it's a game. Could you talk about that, Ariel and Joe?
So it always becomes a thing, I think, in QA too. You're just not as excited about the title that you're working on, the further and further down you go. And sometimes, if you are, that's awesome. You're a different kind of person, but I would say the vast majority of people, especially in QA, end up having some kind of animosity toward a project that they work on. And I think that this can mitigate that by introducing, if nothing else, some healthy competition into your team. And I think a lot of times competition in a team, as long as it's in a healthy way and in a constructive way, and ultimately it is, because two people wanting to beat each other's score, which happens pretty frequently. They want to be the fastest, and they will drive each other to run quicker. But at the same time, they're getting test plans done. They're flexing that muscle, and they're also contributing to alleviating bottlenecks and to informing developers and to being like, hey, this is how fast we can do it now. Like, even that question, that was always a hot issue, was like, how fast is it now? And I'm like, it's 2 hours. And then a week later, like, oh, it's like 90 minutes. And like, oh, it's getting pretty interesting. It's just makes it more fun. I can't really describe it better. It's just like, I like working in the games industry because I work with games, I enjoy it's fun. on your worst day, you're still working on a game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's like a common interview question for QA, right? Is like, well, how will you stay invested in something after like testing it for the 100th time, right? Like, how will you keep yourself from getting bored? And like a common answer you hear is, well, I just like really like breaking things, right? So the more I get to break things, like the happier I'll be. But I think that another maybe better solution, because you don't always get to break things, quote unquote. Nor is that really our job. But anyway, That's a conversation we've had multiple times in other
sure.
episodes. But there is something to be said about having a game about the game. And that game can be fun. And speedrunning is definitely, I think, a game about a game.
Correct.
So, you can have, other kinds of competitions on development teams too, like who writes the most bugs or whatever. But I think this is probably a healthier
I was going to say, because
competition to have.
the who can write most bugs thing just means you're going to get more badly
exactly.
written bugs.
You're going to get quantity over quality.
I'm going to take this one bug and I'm going to bug it 20 instances for each instance it appears instead of the one core issue.
We had a good question in chat here. It says, do you track completion time and use that as a QA metric? It was 2 hours, but we shortened it to 90 minutes in a week. But a week later, it's still hovering around 90 minutes. Yeah, we would give reports on certain things like that. We would provide, we would download some speedrunning tools like OBS and LiveSplit, and we would make our categories and have those timed, and we would be recording it on OBS, and we'd send that to developers, and they could see it because it's you're automatically timestamping it as you use LiveSplit, which is useful.
Because then you get to see exactly which area is increased in time or decreased in time, right?
And it was interesting for me too, because I would, since I was like leading the team of people doing that, I would always set this like goal for myself and for the team to be like, all right, initially we're like maybe 4 hours. And then like when it was just me, I was like, I think I can do it in like 4 hours. And then it would just keep whittling down. We get more people, exponentially, broadening how quickly we could do these things. And I'd said to myself, like, if we can get it under an hour before this game releases, like that's my goal. And we did. And I was really like, that was it. I didn't do it, but somebody else did. And it was awesome. I couldn't ask for more at that point.
It's amazing what teams can accomplish when you present them with the problem and
yes.
the ask at the same time.
Yes.
So you mentioned before the aspect of speedrunning getting you more access to the development team, or getting different conversations with the development team and the design of the game. Could you tell us a little bit about how speedrunning can affect design?
It depends on the kind of game that you're making. Obviously, I think it can inform many different kinds of games, but obviously it informs design of games that have some kind of like action aspect to it. But it can inform puzzle games, all kinds of stuff. But it just helps to make a better like holistic experience in a game without like, you have people that are playing a game organically that have already, they represent a piece of your consumer market that is very important to how your game will be perceived once after the dust settles, after that. And when you have opinions from people that get, that are this like proficient at your title, it just becomes really valuable in informing to developers, in my opinion, because a lot of times, even at some of its like I guess a lowest point, I don't want to say like a lowest point for QA, but like a role that we take on sometimes is a like prototype consumer, and I think that it's great to have a wide swath of different like kind of like profiles of people on your team, but I do think that some of the most valuable information comes from the proto consumer that is representative of a super fan or a person that will be playing your game again for 5 years instead of 5 months. Like, that's, you know what I mean?
One of my favorite experiences with in terms of my own experience with speedrunning and development was I was working on a game and I noticed that you could complete this swath of content that was supposed to take about 10 hours and you could complete it in a half hour. And the reason why was because there's no like gatekeeping between areas. you could just go into the higher level areas as soon as you wanted to, and there was no gatekeeping on items, so you could use higher level items as soon as you found them. So you would go from one area to the next, you would get a new weapon, and you'd be like, all right, I have the higher level weapons, so I can kill the higher level monsters. I'm just going to skip everything else and blow right on to the next area.
Right.
And then you just do that for every single area. And so you could go through 8 areas in like a half hour instead of 8 areas in 10 hours that it was supposed to take you, right?
Yeah. Balancing is definitely a big part of that, because that's what you're pretty much playing against, is the balance of the game. And at its core, a lot of speedrunning, you don't, if there's a game with like upgrade potentials, and usually like you're building up a character or something like that, speedrunning a lot of times just utilizes the base kit that you're given from the beginning of the game. So how can you best use like just the basic movement or strafing or
or the butter knife,
or the butter knife, right?
Or a kick.
I mean, I think in a lot of games, like if you're really good at avoiding getting hit, it's really easy to progress very quickly if your weapon is good. And because your armor doesn't matter. Your armor only matters if you get hit by stuff. But if you're not getting hit by stuff, it's kind of like in Dark Souls, how like in Dark Souls you can run around with no armor and just a big old sword, but still do great because you're really fast without any armor on.
Yeah, as long as you're not getting hit. Yeah.
So as long as you're not getting hit, it's fine. But I would say most games want you to go through the full progression tree, right? Like they don't want you to just skip to skip past all of this content, all this gear, and all these items and stuff that they made. They want you to use all that stuff and like slowly.
They're usually designed with that in mind.
Right. Yeah. So I actually like to, when I'm on titles, I like to have, when we run playtests, I like to have at least one playtest that, you focus on the speedrunner's mindset, right? Like you can run playtests where like everyone's gonna, play this game from like the explorer's mindset, and everyone's gonna play the game from the completionist mindset. But today we're gonna play it from the speedrunner mindset, and just see like how fast people get through it, because that might get their wheels turning in terms of like, all right, well, like we actually do want them to play with that content. So how can I like get them to go engage with that content that we don't want them to skip, instead of incentivizing them to skip past game, right? We don't want them to be incentivized to do that.
See, that sounds like it's incredibly valuable for development studios to think about that, because like you said, Joe, how do we get someone playing for 5 years versus 5 months or even 2 months? Is this idea of looking at the game and identifying, well, what are the goals of these different kinds of players, and how can we reward them?
Yeah.
So if you're only rewarding people for going down this path, but like someone goes, well, I want an evil character. What do I do now?
Right.
Do I have to break the entire Oblivion game because I want to play a vampire?
Yeah. Well, that was something too that we that I personally would think about, was like, I don't necessarily want our approach to be make this easier for us. In fact, I kind of want the opposite. Or I want it to be tuned to a way that makes it more appealing for anyone, that matches these different kind of like consumer profiles. God, that sound like, I hate calling people consumer profiles, but holy shit.
You can also call them player archetypes.
Player archetypes. Yeah, that's a little better. That sounds more like people. So just what needs of what folks do you want to meet? And it's important for us to not just be selfish about like, well, I like this. Like if there was something that felt too easy, I have to talk about that. Like if it was like, if this is just, because that's going to affect casual players. That's going to affect people that will play this casually, because if there's certain things that are just such a like, you're just given this, you have to like think about all these different people that are playing your title. That's my point and all that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you mentioned some things. So there was some talk about user personas or personae and consumer profiles or gamer archetypes. And so there's decisions that are being made. And so here's a question about QA and speedrunning. Like, when does the fun of speedrunning conflict with the QA process? Like, whether, from the perspective of the studio, never. Okay, all right, cool. Done.
It should never.
Well, it should never, right?
That's right.
But
ideally, it should never.
I think that it certainly is possible that you could have someone who's really competitive, right? Yeah. And their personal goal is, I want to have the fastest speed run on the team. Mm-hmm. But if I stop and write a bug, then I'm going to ruin this playthrough I'm doing or something like that.
Sure.
So I think assuming good actors, right? Then yeah, I don't think that there's a
fair
conflict.
Enough. Yeah, there's a plethora of reasons why things don't or stop becoming fun, and but in my opinion, that's the goal.
They start getting real.
Yeah.
I think that's the intro to Dave Chappelle skit, the Mad Real World or something like that.
When keeping it real goes wrong. Yeah.
Yes. So we're in the bottom quarter of the show today, and now it's time to talk about, getting started with speedrunning on your team. So how could someone get started? And explain it, justify it on their team.
Well, I think a lot of these teams already do something similar to having more dedicated speedrunners for their teams. But I think that ultimately giving these people that you're trusting to speedrun your title more agency and open communications with developers to a point, and speaking to your leads, show them that try it out, give it a point of time to see if it can alleviate some bottlenecks. If having certain people on your team that can experience the content very quickly can alleviate problems for you, empower those people, give them agency, allow them to do their job, and utilize that well. I can't really speak to how to just make that happen on a development team, but I think part of it is going to come down to individuals, taking charge for themselves and just saying, I'm gonna do this if it doesn't conflict with other assignments and things that you have to do. And ultimately, I think that the knowledge that you gain from learning speedrunning will help your teams so much that no one's gonna bat an eye at it once you are applying that knowledge to a utility purpose. And if you're lucky enough to work with developers or with studios that actually value design opinions from people that do this kind of thing, all the better, in my opinion. So
I think there's probably a couple good places you can start to have this conversation, because they're inarguably useful. For example, I want to make it so we can run our smoke test in an hour and 15 minutes instead of an hour and a half. So I'm going to adjust our test cases and the overall flow of it, and then record your results on that activity, right? All right, it used to take us 90 minutes to run. Now it takes us 87 minutes to run. So restructuring our smoke test didn't remove anything important from it, but we saved 13 minutes on it. And I would like to go do this in other spaces of QA too. I think that is something that is already a part of a QA team's job, right? Is to run test passes efficiently. So no one is going to say, no, you can't save us time, right?
That's kind of what I mean.
They might say, we don't need those metrics, right, about how long it's taking you to complete the golden path. Okay, so we won't go get them for you. But I can do the thing that I'm already doing and do it better, and then maybe use that as ammunition to say, look, I sped up our test by 13 minutes. If you let me apply some of these techniques to some of the other things that we're doing, I think we can get a good bang for our buck there too. Absolutely. And also if you can get to a point where you can say, well, we can run through the golden path of the first 2 levels in an hour. So if you ever need recordings of that, like, you can come to us and we'll tell you how to do it like that. I think it's look for those like kind of bite-sized chunks that already relate to stuff that you're doing, and then maybe you can add on stuff later, like Joe has been doing with his team in terms of like getting live split recordings and then telling the developers
and it will
when they
literally
increase
fall
it.
into your lap. If you're doing tests efficiently, then tasks will just fall into your lap. Or it should in a way that works.
Yeah. So start with the value.
Yeah.
And right, like, so read the room, right? Like, if your company is stressed and you have leaders that focus on utility, then leverage the things that we talked about today and some things that you can find out in the community about the utility. If your leadership is more on the art side and they're trying to make an amazing experience because they may want to get to market first, it may be a game that no one's ever done before, and so getting feedback and focusing on the experience is that's a really strong go-to-market strategy. So for some games, hypothetically speaking, then that may support your strategy. So start with value, but it starts with assessing what is valuable at your organization.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think no matter what is valuable at your organization, if you're making an interactive experience, having people that can get through that quickly is valuable, regardless of what you're focused on.
Yeah, like it's always valuable to maintain the same level of quality, but also decrease how long it takes you to do that same thing, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like you can imagine, like, just imagine the person that's focused on the dots and the utility side, but you can imagine like the quality artist leader being like, and it's still fun. Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah. Let's everyone. Let's check this out.
Yeah, having the ability to transform a product before it's released is also, good to know.
Yeah. So any last thoughts before we move into the wrap up?
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you bringing
no
this
problem. If you're not doing this, do it. That's that's my thought, pretty much.
Yeah. It's there's a lot to this, and it's worth exploring. Like, even if you're doing something that you've just been doing for a long time, give it a shot. It might make your day more fun and energize the team as we're going into holiday season or whatever.
And I say as well, if you're doing things that you've been doing for a long time, reassess those things, because there's a good chance there's a better way to do it.
Chelsea says, if you're not doing this, do it. Like, it works if you work it.
Yeah.
Yep. So, the bug of the day.
Oh yeah. This is such a great bug. Okay, so this is a speedrunning related bug. I'm going to post a link to it in the chat here. But this is from Two Worlds. It was an any percent speed run, and one of the fun things about Two Worlds is the end game boss is located in the very beginning area of the game, and you can go up and talk to him, and he'll say evil stuff to you or whatever, and then you can go on with the rest of the game, right? And there's also a bunch of other NPCs, and the NPCs will just mob anything that attacks one of them. So if you kill an NPC, they'll get mad and they'll all scramble and beat you up and stuff. But you can also trick the end game boss into accidentally hitting one of the villagers, at which point the entire village will all turn on him and attack him and kill him. And as soon as the end game boss is defeated, the credits roll. So this is considered to be a legitimate win on the game, because you actually get to the credit screen for the game. And I think the fastest version of it right now is 1 minute and 41 seconds to beat Two Worlds.
That's so good.
Just to be clear, griefing is not a feature or strategy that was built into that game. Like,
Well, it's a single player game.
okay, right. Well,
Yeah.
technically,
But yeah, I mean, like, no one. I don't think the developers intended for people to beat the game this way. But yeah, it's certainly it's a really fun, very short video. So go watch it, and you'll see exactly how it happened. But it's pretty good stuff.
All right, y'all. Well, that's it for us today. I want to thank Joe
Thank you.
and for joining the podcast today, and Ariel, as always, for being on here, working with us to get through some amazing experience for hopefully amazing experience for those of you who are either in the chat or who will see this later. If you have any suggestions for future topics or bugs of the day, we'd love to hear them. If you are a QA professional and would like to be on the podcast, we'd love to have you. In either case, please contact us at undergroundgameqaconf, C-O-N-F, @gmail.com, or reach out on Twitter at undergroundqa, because we'd love to hear from you and collaborate. Before we go, it's a chance to plug. Anyone got anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I do.
Go for it, Joe.
I'll give a shout out to every mom on the planet. You get a shout out. And in addition, I'd like to shout out my team at Bethesda Softworks. Great people. Again, I'm going to shout out Arcane Leon because they're the best developers in the world. That's all I got. Thank you so much. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my @ is at @thud_Rogers. And that's all I got. Have a good one.
Thanks, Joe. Ariel?
Yeah, so I guess so. I have to plug something really cool that Bungie is doing right now. They they're donating the proceeds of the Pride pin that they sell in the Bungie store to the Trans Lifeline this month in honor of the Transgender Awareness Month. And I personally think it's really rad to be able to work for a company that does something like that. They actually have this pop-up that appears in game when you jump into Destiny, and it will tell you that it's Transgender Awareness Month and that this thing is happening. And it's just really meaningful to have a company that is so proactive in supporting the LGBT community the way Bungie is. So I know I am totally drinking the Kool-Aid over there. I'm not gonna lie.
They put their money where their mouth is. It's for sure. It's great.
Oh man, do they really make it easy? Thanks for linking that, Chelsea.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty cool, and just gotta give them love for that.
Awesome.
Thanks for sharing that plug. Those are both very special for different reasons, but they underscore, I think, like humanity, right? And so my plug for this week is you. Who you are matters. Take yourself into consideration when you think about what you want to do, either this week, next week, or for the next number of years. You may have been told that who you are doesn't matter, and you should just suck it up and do these 5 things. But who you are matters. And figure that out. What does that mean to you? And with that, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and hit the music. Maybe it'll play this time. It totally didn't, so let me play it manually.
Perfect.
All those buttons and...
Hey, it wouldn't be a QA podcast if nothing went wrong.
Sometimes you just got to play the music manually, you know?
Yeah, well, it seems like it's broken, so I'm going to...
Just hum it.
There it goes.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
welcome.
thanks for joining us.
So much for joining us.
And for everyone else out there, keep playing, keep testing, and please keep washing your hands.
Yes.